Hi guys, I thought I'd give you a walkthrough of a script I've written that was based on an idea that JP came up with for how we might be able to move iMovie projects around without having to copy multi 16 gigabyte files, etc. So what this will actually do is this will create an archive file that we can copy around that contains only the stuff that isn't in the shared folder. So I'm going to show how you use it, and we can do some experimenting. But my script expects to find the thing you want to export in its own library. So in order to do that, what we do here is we get iMovie up and we do Open Library, New. It expects to find it in your Movies folder, so you have to go to your Movies folder, either there or from your Home folder, and it expects it to be called Export. We can improve this later, but for the time being that's what it expects. Now anything you put in there will get exported, but the most straightforward way is to actually just put the project that we're working on in there. So we go into our Projects tab. I'm going to export this Good Friday service, and from here we can do Copy to Library and into the Export library we've just created. If it's on the same disk, that's quite quick. You can see we've now got both libraries open. If it's on another disk, it takes a while to copy all the media, but that has put the project into export. You have to have one event, even though we're not using events in this case. At that point we need to close that library, so iMovie's not doing anything with it, and we now move over to the scripts. So I have put the scripts in the OneDrive, so I've got to get to that place, and I think it's in useful material for editors, iMovie export. So that's where we're at on my machine, but obviously you may have the OneDrive folder mounted in different places. In there are a few files. The one that we're most import at the moment is export.py. If you run it, you'll see it needs to know where your OneDrive folder is. So I run it again, but this time I'm going to tell it that it's home. That's where my OneDrive is. So what that's now going to do is it's going to go through that OneDrive and your local copy and create MD5 sums, sort of fingerprints of all the files in there. It's then going to go through the iMovie export library that you just created and do the same thing, and then it creates an archive, a tar.gz archive of all the files that are not available in the shared folder, and it also adds into that a list of the ones that are in the shared folder to be added back in later. It'll be a little clearer once we get to the end of this. Now this process is quite slow because currently it's going through the whole of the export library there, so that it has to do, and here it's now going to do the checksums of all the stuff in the shared folder. I probably could cache this and make it faster, but at the moment I've just left it as is. So I'll just skip forward in the video here, skip past this. Okay, so we're back in. That took quite some time because, as you can see, it's fairly dumb. It looks absolutely everywhere, including in the final folder and things, but that can be sped up later. It then goes into this process, and what it's doing now is it's comparing all the media files that it finds, or in fact all the files that it finds in the export folder, export library, against the ones that are available in the OneDrive, and then it creates a tar.gzip file of anything that isn't available in the OneDrive folder and adds into that an extra file describing where to get the missing parts. So if I now look at that, we'll see export TGZ is less than a gigabyte, whereas the iMovie that we exported was 16, nearly 17 gigabytes. So move that back. So this export.tgz can now be placed somewhere on the shared folder or rsync to somebody else who has access to the shared folder. If I now want to get that back to a project, a library, I use the import command. And again, just to show you, it's going to need to know where you keep your OneDrive. So what this does now, if we can watch it on here, it's going to unpack the tar file. That's the wrong one, sorry. You can see an export library has appeared in the script folder. Nowhere near big enough yet. But now, unfortunately, it's doing the same process. It's going through the shared folder again, creating all the checksums. So there's obviously potential here for caching checksums. So once again, I'm going to skip through this part. The reason I'm not doing caching of checksums at the moment is because the shared folder can obviously change at any point, and just because something has the same name, it may not be the same file. But certainly it is possible to speed this part up. It's still an awful lot faster, even as it stands, than uploading 16 and downloading 16 gigabytes of files. So I'll fast forward past this. Okay, now we can see it finished doing all the local hashes. So now what it's doing is it's finding in the OneDrive the missing files from the library, and it's copying them in. So you can actually see this library is now growing as it copies the files that are missing in from OneDrive. On an SSD it's reasonably quick. I don't know about it. On my external USB drive it wasn't too bad. But fairly soon we will get back to the 16 gigabytes here. If any files are missing, you'll get an error message to tell you. Hey, there we go. So we now have an export library in here. Now, something worth saying is at the moment the script dumps all its files in the script directory, and that's on if that's on a shared folder, that could cause trouble between us. So it's probably best to make a local copy somewhere of this iMovie export folder. However, here's the interesting bit. If I now go back into iMovie and open a library, not that one because that's the original. In fact, just to prove the point, I'll bring up my movies folder and we will delete this one. So in here we can now go open library, other, locate. So for me it's in AJF, so you see OneDrive, let's get that one wrong. In here, useful material for editors, iMovie export. This is the recreated library. We open it. And if I go here, it's looking good. If I go to projects, in fact, just to check, I will close the standard iMovie library. So we've only got one source now. This project is the one that we added to the export. And if we open it, it's all there. Okay, so there we go. The file that we had to transfer for that was this one, which was less than a gigabyte instead of the full size. So there is also another option that you can run. If you run the archive export version of the file, it will expect anything to be in the export iMovie library like I've shown you, But what that does is it actually uses hashes I've pre-calculated of everything that I've got in the backup archive. So if the files aren't in OneDrive but they are in the backup, you can send a project to me because I have the backup by using archive export, and I can import it with archive import. The only difference being, instead of using the OneDrive share, it's using my backups to do that. So let's have a play. Thank you.